Radio or 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider, Sports Talk 1050, WTKA, online at WTKA.com. You know what we do on Thursdays in the 9 o'clock hour. My guys from MGoBlog come on, and we do the MGoBlog Roundtable. Now, we had hoped this would be a celebratory session. We had hoped that we would have a banner, a championship banner, virtually behind me. Unfortunately, that was not to be, as the Wolverines fell in the Frozen Four. To recap that, as painful as though it may be, is my friends from MGoBlog, starting off with Brian Cook. BC, good morning. How are you?
I mean, I was good, and then you said all that stuff.
Hey, man, we got to do it. We got to do it.
I know, but, you know.
Yeah, it's not fun. Not fun. Seth, how are you?
I'm good. It's beautiful out, so I'm trying to do all the recruiting right now.
I fully expected to see like more gray from you this morning. I thought you come and just be totally gray after last Thursday's game. But
how are you? I mean, you sweet summer child. Like this is Michigan hockey. You think this is new?
Yeah, I hear you. Craig Ross, how are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm wondering how Brian's skiing adventures went. I didn't ask him that. How did this go? Like you were skiing someplace exotic.
Yeah, well, it was good. I liked it. What do you want me to say?
All right, it's good. You liked it. Good. I'm glad.
I liked it better than the last Thursday outcome. So I won't belabor the point, but I got to get you guys your thoughts on what happened, why it happened, and then of course a happier thing I guess would be to kind of do some projections into next year and whether you think it's a legitimate sort of expectation, legitimate possibility that Adam Fantilli comes back. That was something that Spath mentioned yesterday that he thinks is a possibility. I wonder whether you guys agree, but let's just start off with the loss to Quinnipiac, the eventual national champion, Brian. But boy, it was you looked at Michigan on the defensive end of the ice, and it was like, man, a lot of pressure on Eric Portillo, and it was eventually they got home with actually some of the softer attempts went through.
Well, so people have been arguing about this ever since it happened, and for my point of view, soft goals override everything else you do in a hockey game. Because even a pretty good scoring attempt, it's not, like 0.9 expected goals. Like, and you see on replay some of the great Portillo saves are just guys shooting it into his pad. So he's moving across. They've got a window, they've got an opening, and the guy just doesn't lift it or doesn't put it to the side. And the fact that Portillo is 6'6" helps there. But you just can't get over the fact that you gave up 3 of the softest goals I've ever seen to the best defensive team in the country. And step 1 to beating Quinnipiac is don't hit 3 posts. Step 2 is don't give up soft goals to the best defensive team in the country. And I don't think that there's any way to characterize 3 or 4 of the non-empty net Quinnipiac goals as anything but the softest things you've ever seen. And, they have kind of a rough first period, although I felt that after the first 10 minutes that they pretty much evened it out. I thought they dominated the second period, and then 2 minutes into the third period, you get a second bank shot goal from behind the end line. And, I mean, personally, I don't know if you guys were able to keep it together, but I kind of lost my mind at that. Because for that to happen twice in a single game is just, I've never seen that before, and I hope to never see it again.
Yeah, at least not against your team, right?
No, and sports can be cruel, and this is going to be the cruel reality of Eric Portillo's legacy is he's Billy Sauer now. Like Billy Sauer had a rough year. Michigan goes to the Frozen Four. He gives up 3 bad goals in the first period against Notre Dame, and Michigan loses that game. And that's how I remember Billy Sauer, and this is how I'm going to remember Eric Portillo.
So question for you, Brian. If you look at and I get what you're saying, he's a big dude, so maybe some of the saves that look like they're spectacular are really made to look more spectacular because you got this big guy kind of making the move to get into position. But it just felt like there was a lot. It felt like there were a lot of shots, and he felt like he was getting peppered early. Now that doesn't.
I mean, they had 9 shots in the first period. Michigan had 8, and like they had, I think Quinnipiac controlled the play for the most part in the first period, but it wasn't like Penn State game early in the year. It wasn't like that Ohio State game earlier where he's just under siege. It's like they had a number of decent to good opportunities, like maybe a couple grade A's, but I don't think that you can characterize that game as the sort of thing where he's keeping Michigan in it. He's making some saves. He gives up a goal on was it a breakaway or was it 2-on-1?
It was a 2-on-1.
It was a 2-on-1, and like that'll happen, right? But the XG of the shots that Quinnipiac was getting, I don't think was huge, and I feel like, I mean, there's some merit to the idea that, like, yeah, he made some saves, but he also gave up 3 bad goals, and that overrides pretty much anything that you could do short of being Dominic Hasek. That's it.
Yeah.
Go, Craig. Go ahead.
That's okay. I disagree slightly, I guess. I mean, the first goal, that's the bank shot off him, was mystifying that he would be out of the goal, so far out of the goal when the puck is behind him, and that to me was just bizarre. But then I felt in the second period he did a lot to get Michigan back, help Michigan get back into that game. And at the end of the second period, I thought, okay, Portillo has played pretty well this period. They had a couple of odd man breaks that he did shut down. Whether they shot it into him or not, I'm not certain. And so it's 2-2 going in the third, and I thought, this is a game Michigan's going to win. And then inexplicably, he gives up that goal again from behind the net, where he's too far away from the post, and the puck banks off him back into the net. To some extent, I think he's unlucky. To some extent, it was just such terrible goaltending that it was maddening. And my reaction, I suspect, was about the same as Brian's at that point. And then he gives
sound like a whole lot of disagreement so far.
Well, I felt that he played okay in the second period. And
sure.
Here's what I likened it to. If you're a quarterback who has 3 touchdowns in a bowl game, who throws 3 touchdowns in a bowl game, and throws 3 howler pick sixes.
We saw that this year, something like it.
No,
right?
We saw 2.
Yeah.
Like, I had another pick 6, and that's what that felt like. Because if you do that, those events just absolutely change the game. And yes, you can do a lot of other great things in the game that helped your team win. But those events are just absolute. Just the last goal, that saucer pass, it's just like they're down 1, they have the control of the play, the ice is tilting their way, and then he gives that up on a nothing play off the boards, and it's just like, well, dude, you're the story now.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that that's true, and so it's a maddening game. I wonder, I mean, maybe jumping forward a bit too far, I mean, what does goaltending look like next year? Because Noah West was in the portal, and now he's back out of the portal. He's coming back to Michigan. He barely played this year. He looked good one game. He looked not so good another. And then they've got Brandman, who I know little about from the United States Hockey League, whose numbers were okay in the United States Hockey League, but people tell me he's just an ordinary guy. I mean, do you guys have any?
But this is what I was going to ask. I mean, how good is the transfer portal in hockey? Is like, can you go and get like an ace goaltender in the transfer portal?
Well,
you can.
Brown's goalie is currently in the portal, and he had a 920 or something.
Okay.
And West he started like half the games for Robert Morris a couple years ago, had a 919. Mm-hmm. So if they do end up going with Noah West, I don't think that he'll be like a Wisconsin goalie level disaster. I think he might actually be an improvement on Portillo, just based on, I mean, the fact that Portillo had one of the worst 10 save percentages in the year this year. So there are a couple guys in the portal that I think you might see a couple guys shake loose. But I think Michigan should be laser focused on Matthew Caron, who's the Brown goalie.
Okay. What about Brandman? Do you have any instinct about him? His numbers were okay.
He's an overager that they brought in to have a guy.
I mean, that's a little bit less of an issue for goalies. Like if you have a guy who's 20 who's performing in the USHL, you kind of downgrade what you think his performance is. But goalies develop late, But I mean, the guy's got a 901 in his single USHL year. And if you go look at his Swedish numbers, they're not great. Okay. I would not expect him to be the starter. I think that they're going to hit the portal. I think they're going to hit the portal for a defenseman. And just because they don't really have a whole lot coming in this year because of the whole Mel fiasco. So they got a couple forwards coming in who I think can be quick impact guys, particularly Nick Moldenhauer. Yeah. But the goalie situation is, I think you really gotta. West is a possibility. I think he'll be decent, but you're looking at the portal.
What about Bischel? Doesn't he listen to this show? Doesn't he have another year of eligibility?
He does. I think he's going back to Notre Dame, but if he wants to come to Michigan, I'm listening.
So what about Adam Fantilli, Hobie Baker? So let's obviously shout that out. I think it's just Michigan's third, right? Wasn't he just Michigan's third?
Yes.
Third.
Hobie winner. All right. And so the best player in college hockey, best player in another sport in any other sport who's draft eligible goes. But we've seen in recent years, Michigan's best player certainly could go and be ready to do his thing in the NHL. Still come back.
Power was a defenseman though, and it kind of matters on the team that drafts him, which I think Chicago has the second pick. So if Chicago drafts him, they'd be smart to leave him in college for a year if he wants to stick around. Just because,
Chicago would be ideal.
Yeah,
because they hate spending money.
Yeah,
they hate spending money. They got terrible ownership. That's right. Like the logical thing for a team like Chicago to do is leave Adam Fantilli in college another year, tank, get another real high pick, and then sign everybody and try to have a window of competition. And the way the CBA works in the NHL is that you got to be 27 to be a free agent unless you have, I think it's 7 years of accrued time. So if you're signing Adam Fantilli right out of college this year, you're losing his 26 and 27 years. And if you're asking me, do I want Adam Fantilli for a non-competitive year that we're going to have next year, or do I want him possibly under team control for another couple of years when we might be pretty good down the road? That's a no-brainer. But teams don't always think like that, don't often think like that. There's time pressure. You got to show improvement, otherwise you're going to get fired, that kind of stuff. They don't think long term. But the Blackhawks, God bless the Blackhawks.
The problem is the Blackhawks are idiots. The problem is the Blackhawks.
Well, yeah.
From the top to the bottom are morons, and one of the things they like to do is draft a guy and then sell the jersey because that's all they're ever going to get out of him, and that's kind of what I'm worried they're going to do.
Well, I mean, they were going to leave, I think, Frank Nazar for another year anyway, and he had an injury. But even before he got hurt, there was a lot of talk from Chicago that they were just going to leave him in college for another year. So I mean, I think it really probably is up to the team that drafts him more than anything else. And I think Fantilli has Seth has a little bit of insider information that indicates that Fantilli isn't completely out the door. He's registered for some classes at Michigan, that kind of thing. So I think that the door's open, and we'll have to see what the team that drafts him wants to do.
Well, if Fantilli comes back, Michigan will, and they can, get goaltending next year, Michigan should be right there again. I mean, they lose Samoskevich, but I think Moldenhauer might be fairly sideways with Samoskevich. I mean, I think they're similar abilities.
I mean, I think Moldenhauer will be good. I think asking him to be sophomore Samoskevich is a little bit much, but freshman Samoskevich, sure. And then you're going to get McGroarty back. That's already been decided. You're probably going to get Brindley back. I think both those guys take big steps forward. I think TJ Hughes is going to be a good player for a long time here at Michigan. Like you still got Duke. You're going to have a healthy Frank Nazar, and you know Nazar made some impact after he came back, but it was clear that he wasn't the same player. He's still not all the way back. It'll take a summer for him to get there. And then Seamus Casey was insanely good against Quinnipiac, and I think that might presage a season where he's like your star defenseman. You get Edwards back. You should get Truscott back. That's another guy who NHL guys who follow. I forget who he's drafted by, maybe the Jets, but athletic.com guys, I should say, for the Jets have said that they expect that Truscott will return to Michigan and probably be the captain. So if they can pick up Ryan Seedham, who's a guy who's transferring out of Harvard after being on their top pairing because the Ivy League won't let him continue playing at Harvard.
That's right, because you can't be a grad player,
right? So
the Ivies, right?
Your top two pairings are probably Truscott and Casey, and then Ethan Edwards and Seedham. That's
pretty good. Yeah.
So anything coming in this recruiting class?
Yeah, Moldenhauer is a third-round pick of last year, but his draft year, he was just injured. He had the worst draft year, and he's been crushing it in the USHL in a way that makes you think that he'll come in and immediately be a scoring line player. That's a guy who Naruto picked up late, and that's kind of the story of the guys in this class, is that there's some guys who will be productive third and fourth line players, maybe a third pairing defenseman or two. But aside from Moldenhauer, there isn't a guy who you're pointing at and being like, this guy is going to be an impact player next year. So they might look in the portal more than they had before, depending on who stays and who goes. Like, if you get Fantilli back, your top two centers are Fantilli and Nazar, and then you have Moldenhauer, Brindley, McGroarty, Duke flanking those guys. I don't know if you really need a whole lot.
What would you bring back out of like some of the old guys? I know like Granowitz is in the portal and Pearson's in the portal, and who else was it? Oh, Ciccolini.
I mean,
like those guys.
If you, I would bring back Ciccolini. I like him as a third liner. Granowitz, I could kind of take or leave. I kind of feel like it's Draper and LaPointe's turn to have that fourth line role. And then Pearson, I mean, if you get Seedham out of the portal, I don't really see that you need a huge role for him, because if you get Karanen back, I think he's a really solid third pairing defenseman, and then you just got to find one more guy. Personally, I've never been a huge fan of Pearson's game. He's solid, but I don't think he's a guy who you would miss a whole lot if he ended up somewhere else.
All right, we got a nice preview for next year. Really, it's the Fantilli watch. It's amazing what it seems like.
I think they'll be a good team next year, even without Fantilli. But with Fantilli, he's a huge difference maker.
I mean,
he's the best player in college hockey.
Yeah, so. If you get the Hobie Baker winner back. And like this is a draft eligible player, right? How much better is he going to be next year? It'll be insane. So, I'm not getting my hopes up, but I'm getting my hopes up a little bit. I mean, even without Fantilli, and I think that's the most likely outcome here. They'll be a good team. They'll make the tournament.
But you're saying there's a chance.
I am saying there's a chance.
Yeah, I mean, if I think he's going to end up with the Blackhawks, or I think there's a good chance of that, and anything with the Blackhawks is just, who knows.
And keep in mind, just making the tournament is all you need to do. Like the national champ, the playoff is so ridiculous that at that point it's just Plinko.
Well, I mean, we say that, but the last couple of years there's been a distinct separation. So last year's Frozen Four was Denver, Minnesota, and a very good UMD team. This year's Frozen Four was Michigan, Minnesota, a very good Quinnipiac team, and BU. So the Plinko, and believe me, I am a full believer in the Plinko stuff, but the last couple of years it has been like these are the best teams who happen to be in the Frozen Four, which has been nice. Well, I guess it hasn't been nice,
Right?
Nice, Brian. But
Yeah.
not like even though like once you get to the Frozen Four, I think there actually has been a greater difference between like the bottom teams. Like you saw the Big Ten just absolutely dominate in the early rounds this year, and I think that's because. But like when those teams are just so much better. I think there's been a bigger gap growing between those the bottom East teams that just kind of always make the tournament, and then even like the Penn State, Ohio State level in the Big Ten has just gotten that much better.
I mean, if you look at the hockey coaches in the Big Ten, they're all good now, pending what Wisconsin does, right? Like Adam Nightingale immediately made
great coach, I thought.
I mean, Adam Nightingale immediately made Michigan State competitive. He's got a couple of really interesting guys out of the portal, including a first-round pick, guys he used to use to coach at the national team. You got Oseki at Ohio State, who I think is great. I mean, you have, I forget Penn State's coach, Gwozdecki. I think he's excellent. I mean, you got Jeff Jackson at Notre Dame. You got Motzko at Minnesota. Like, honestly, it is a killer lineup. So not only do you have all the talent coming into the Big Ten, which is going to continue, but I mean, who's the worst coach in the league? I can't answer that.
Yeah.
So let's take an opportunity to break as a segue. You want to break as a segue, Ira, to get over into basketball, where it's been a flurry of portal activity. There have been some when you talk about high ranking coming out of high school, obviously Namari Burnett, but Caleb Love was a star of their tournament run back in 22, was obviously looked upon as one of the reasons for they flailed last year in Chapel Hill. Trey Jackson, I think, is a sneaky good pick we'll talk about. And they're still pursuing guys in the portal. And then there's still the question, what does the future hold for Hunter Dickinson? We will tackle all of that when we come back on the other side. More MGoBlog Roundtable here on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket.
Clear on the radio.
Yeah, so what I'm told with Hunter is he, at least one of the collectives, I'm told, is supposed to be making him a pitch next week. And I heard, so I know one is. I heard a second one may be talking to him next week as well, but I haven't confirmed that yet. What's clear to me, though, is in the program, they don't think it's a done deal that Hunter's gone. And clearly, on the collective side of things, there's a belief that he can be enticed to stay. So,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I read an article, and I have no idea how legitimate these articles are, about Blake Corum getting well into the six figures because of Bose. Apparently, Bose Audio is paying Corum, and 2 or 3 other corporations are paying Corum.
Isn't JJ on Bose too? I think JJ might be on Bose as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think both of them are. Both of them are basically doing all the same deals. Because we've gotten a couple of their ads come through before.
The like marketing VP of Apple followed me at some point. And I like looked him up, and I'm like, "That's a Michigan fan. Let's get on it.
Yeah,
let's go."
Well,
All those too, Brian. I said the same thing. I'm like, wait, this looks like a good guy to know for NIL.
yeah.
Yeah, I think this is. I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say it's the only reason why Hunter's in there, but we've talked to him enough to know his opinions on NIL and his opinions on NIL's how it factors into the transfer portal. So I don't think there's any question he is assessing his market value, and it's going to be Michigan being in the game will be okay. Well, what are you coming? In addition to, I imagine he's also looking at who will I be playing with. I think their feeling has been boosted. Feeling about the hopefulness about getting him to return has been boosted by they've actually had some pieces that they brought in. They think he'll find appealing.
All right, pronounce the Tennessee Forest name.
Kamwa, Olivier Kamwa. Yes.
Okay.
Olivier Kamwa.
I had to do that too.
Why is that guy transferring? He
I
started
said the same thing. Did you watch him in the Duke game? I was like,
No,
man.
I mean, I mean, I just looked him up and I was like, okay, this guy's probably like getting 10 minutes a game. And I'm like, no, he's a starter for the number 16 in KenPom. And I was like, he's also like one of their higher usage players, like other than
top usage player. He's the top of the list on KenPom.
You know,
well,
the
it
other
depends
thing,
which metric you're using, but
the other thing about Tennessee is they're the #1 defensive team on KenPom.
Yeah,
and like we were talking. We
Yeah.
were talking about this is like this. Remember when Michigan had Wagner and Livers surrounding Dickinson, and they were a top 10 defense in the country. I mean, if they get pronounce it again, Kamwa. If they get Kamwa and they got Love and Burnett, I mean, that's
Burnett can play defense.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like now you're super athletic. And the fact that Hunter isn't the best defender in the world doesn't really matter nearly as much.
Yeah, absolutely right. So, I mean, it looks like maybe Jawan's theory is, all right, we're going defense. And I think that might be behind the Burnett, grabbing Burnett, even though he's had a sort of checkered career at this point.
He's just been hurt the whole time. Like,
well, that's right. He's been hurt twice. He sat out a year.
Back on radio in about 20 seconds, guys.
But, you know, I don't think he's probably a great offensive player. But he is a good athlete and he can play defense. And so it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. We have to talk about Trey Jackson too, because that's
he's an intriguing.
Stand by, guys. Coming back on radio.
All right.
Back in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTK.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side. Before we get back to the Roundtable crew, want to remind those of you out there who are in the market for a new vehicle, my friends at Brighton Ford take great care of you there. And this month, it's time for their 2022 F-150 blowout sale through May 1st. You can lease the truck that's been voted the #1 truck for over 46 years in a row, the F-150, for as low as $394 a month. With $3,500 down, plus they have 2023 Edges for as little as $279 a month, also with only $3,500 down. That's out at Brighton Ford. It's a great time to get on board with Brighton Ford. So I know that the Michigan coaching staff is hoping that Hunter Dickinson thinks it's a great time to get back on board with them in the aftermath of some portal pickups in their pursuit of at least one more portal addition. But let's start off, fellas, with talking about the more recent additions. I think we talked a little bit about Namari Burnett already, but Caleb Love and Trey Jackson in the fold. Your reaction to those two pieces, Brian Cook?
Well, they're interesting. Trey Jackson, I think, got played out of position last year.
That's correct.
He was pretty good for Seton Hall. What was it, Seton Hall?
Seton Hall.
Yeah, he was pretty good for Seton Hall last year. The previous year, and then he was forced to play the 5 for them as in sort of a backup role for a lot of his minutes, which is not his game. He's a horrible post defender. But if you put him at the 4, where he was much of his junior year, like over the past 2 years, he's shot 121 threes at a 38% clip. He's got some game inside the arc. He's a good free throw shooter, and when he's not asked to defend a center, he's actually a pretty good defensive rebounder. Now, turnovers are a little bit high. He's not providing you a whole lot in terms of blocks, despite being 6'10", not a huge help defender, but pretty efficient, and looks like a guy who could really help out at the 4. Caleb Love, don't run pick and roll with Caleb Love. That's it. Like, get him in situations where he can either catch and shoot or attack a closeout, and you're good. Don't run pick and roll with him.
or coach him harder than Hubert Davis.
Well, I mean, so like he's a guy who, I mean, if he wants to rewrite his story, what his story is, I'm a 2 guard. I'm not a combo. I'm not a point guard. Right. I'm a shooting guard. Agree. And like, if you go look at his synergy numbers, he's a pretty good spot up shooter, and he's very good attacking closeouts. But when you ask him to be in a pick and roll, his numbers are abysmal. hideous.
I imagine that's because he's him in a pick and roll he's just using the pick. It's like,
Yeah, like
I'm shooting every time, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, he's a high usage guy, and Michigan kind of needs that on this roster, right? They need a guy who can go get his own, but that's what it needs to be. It needs to be like, okay, we got 10 seconds on the shot clock. They blew up our action. Go make something happen. You can't make the whole plane out of Caleb Love.
yeah,
So
it's going to be interesting, and then we'll talk broad brush about the difference between this sort of portal dynamic compared to portal dynamics that Michigan's had with their additions in past years. But let's start off with Trey Jackson here, Craig.
Yeah.
He's a victim of a coaching change, right?
Yeah.
You're playing under Kevin Willard at first. He's letting you shoot threes. You're looking really good. And then Shaheen Holloway comes in and he's asking you to do something totally different. That's one of the reasons why I think this is a sneaky good pick. You slide that dude back into the role that he played under Willard, and I think you got something if you're Michigan.
Yeah, Brian said it right. I mean, this last year was a disaster for him. I think he was strictly he didn't play any at the 4. He was strictly a backup center. I think he played, I don't know, 12 to 14 minutes a game as a backup center. And his prior year, his numbers are spectacular. I mean, he's 91% plus from the free throw line. He's, over 50% from 2. He's over 38% from 3. So, I mean, he was a good offensive piece at the 4, and he was a debacle at the 5. And I don't know what his defense really looks like. I haven't, paid enough to Trey Jackson from 2 years ago to know what his defense looks like. But I think, he's a completely plausible piece for Michigan, who had a lot of problems, obviously, at the 4 this year. I mean, it was a sore spot the entire year. In terms of
for Hunter, if you get Hunter back, or even Terrace, I think he's a really good compliment.
Yeah, and so I think that is a sneaky good pick, even though I think he was number 210 in the portal. I think that they weren't looking at it; they were looking at him as a center and not as the position that he should be at. I'm not saying he's Loy Vaught, but I do think that there is something there that might work out. On Numari Burnett, and I thought, well, you've got Burnett and Caleb Love, aren't they both really 2s? But Burnett actually this last year was a 3 at least a third of the time at Alabama in his minutes that he did play. And so I wonder if you could use Caleb at the 2, Burnett at the 3, and actually be completely functional doing that. And I think it's possible.
Yeah, I think that's probably the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, because Burnett is super long. I think somebody had him with a wingspan of 6'9" or 6'10" or something crazy, and he is a good defender. He is 6'4". They could play him at the 3 with Love, and that tends to work out because Burnett seems like a kind of unselfish guy, and he isn't going to be demanding shots, and but the challenge will be, as Brian has pointed out, making sure that Caleb Love doesn't become Chase Audige, right? and shooting up every piece of garbage that every time he gets the ball. I mean, because
but look at how they use Chase Audige and how they're so if you can not have it be as extreme, okay?
Yeah.
Northwestern is a good defensive team that just needs to score enough. Right. And that's what Michigan, I think, is building. Trey Jackson is a good defender. Now, you try to make him a 5, and he just gets eaten up by centers. He's not a 5. And that was his real problem. I mean, he actually can back guys down. But as a 4, he's 6'10", long wingspan, a lot of athleticism, can probably move out and guard 2s. That is a defender. Numari Burnett, guy played on Texas Tech. He knows how to defend. He's long. He's, quick. That's an athlete. Love, another McDonald's All-American athlete, right? You're going from what we were this year, which was like Joey Baker and Hunter Dickinson and Will Shedder on the court at the same time at one point, to that kind of athleticism out there. That's what your team is going to be. they're not going to get scored on nearly as much as they were last year. So now they just need to find some offense. You're going to get some from Doug creating. You're going to get guys who can make their own shots who can attack closeouts and make threes if they're open, and that's a basketball team.
I want to go back to Brian's point though, because it's a key when he said don't put the dude in a pick and roll. And that's like a huge part of Michigan's offense, right? So it's like, do you change what you do, or do you try to change what he does? And this is why it's so interesting to me. This, in the past, whether you're talking about Mike Smith and Devontae Jones, Shawn D. Brown, these are transferred. Jalen Llewellyn, right? These are all guys who are just trying to play up a level. They aren't leaving something. They aren't leaving discontent or disharmony behind. Caleb Love is coming from a team that was in the national championship game a couple of years ago, or back in 22. Namari Burnett is coming from a team that was number 1 in the country. These are dudes who are coming from situations and stepping into a place where they're coming in with expectations. So how do you manage that? If you're Juwan Howard, if you're Caleb Love, you're trying to get, hey, man, I'm getting shots. I got to get to the league. You got to corral that to the point where it fits into your team concept. So role definition going to be very, very key, and kind of setting some reasonable expectations for these guys. And in Caleb Love's case, hey, man, look, we aren't going to make you a point guard, but you also can't be a jacker is what I would say. You can't be a black hole. That's what I call a dude who never passes the basketball.
Yeah,
who always shoots. That can't be.
If you do get Hunter back, like, that's a good situation for Caleb Love, right? I think those two guys fit pretty well together.
Yeah, I agree.
Because as a junior, when he had less pressure on him to actually make all the offense happen, he was a 36% shooter from 3. And when he gets a spot up opportunity, whether he attacks or he shoots, that's a good situation. So you put the ball in his hands and you ask him to go make a shot, that's not going to happen. But that kind of Jet Howard role where, he's not initiating the action, but he's either given the opportunity to take a shot off some action, or he's attacking a defender who's not set. Yeah, that could work better. It'll be really interesting to see, because you talk about Hubert Davis not coaching him, and I'm just like, we'll see how receptive he is, because at this point he's got to know that what he's currently doing is not going to get him to the NBA.
Right.
And we've
dude,
seen guys.
You can't run a pick and roll. You're not playing in the NBA.
Well, no, that's not true. You can play in the NBA. You can't run the pick and roll as long as you can shoot. And and he is a plus spot up shooter. It's just you can't see it unless you dive into the synergy numbers, because it's overwhelmed by the fact that he's 90th percentile in the percentage of possessions he uses that are pick and roll, and he's 20th percentile in efficiency in that, which maybe that was something that UNC just had to do because of the composition of their team, but that looks like the worst coaching malpractice I can think of. So for me, the key to Caleb Love being effective is Doug McDaniel taking a Xavier Simpson lead, where Doug McDaniel is now not just occasionally flashing, but a consistent generator of shots by getting inside, collapsing the defense, and then allowing other people to attack a defense that is scrambling to recover.
Along those lines, I'm really happy that the staff isn't messing with Doug. They've handed the keys over to him, and because the only other point on this team, or potential point, is GW3, and he's just going to be, working his hit into a college system, and so I like the fact that that he has the keys to this particular car, and it seems quite sensible to me along those lines. But yeah, how they work Caleb Love into this offense is going to be a chore, and it's probably the key to the season. Incidentally, I haven't seen Trey Jackson, and is it fair to say that maybe he could become a poor man's Xavier Tillman? I mean, is
Oh,
that
I don't know that he.
Whoa,
I don't know he ever
no,
be that kind of
no,
defender.
That was
Yeah,
what they hoped he would be when he was recruited, and they could
Okay.
not put enough weight on him to make him a 5.
So
Okay.
But he
he
can shoot
starts out at
outside.
Missouri. He spends a year there. He transfers to Seton
Uh-huh.
Hall. They think he's going to have to sit out. The NCAA declares him eligible. He plays a handful of games, but his third year is where you really start to see, man, this could be like a guy. This could be like a really good dude. So, but Willard gets the job at Maryland. And we had to go back to read some of because I wasn't following Seton Hall basketball. I just wanted to go back and see what they were saying about Trey Jackson heading into the season. And the expectation was coming off of his junior year that, man, he was going to break out. But clearly you get in with a different coach who has a different idea of who you are or what your contribution should be to the team. And it really blows you up. That's why I think sliding him in here, asking him to be a stretch 4, man, and he's coming home. We didn't mention that he's coming home
He's
to
from
Detroit.
Yeah.
You know that I just think it's a recipe to be a really, really good pick. With Caleb Love, ton of talent. I think that one is going to be a real test coaching wise about how you bring if you got to coach efficiency into his game because clearly he doesn't have. I think what happened is he was so good on their tournament run. Like I mean, he was so good against Duke. He was so good against UCLA. Like you come off of that, and you're like, man, I'm gonna be the man. I don't know what they say about Bacon. I'm the guy, and he played like that last year. Now, you know, can you put that into some team concept here at Michigan? When on the surface, he probably looks at it like, oh man, they need shots taken. I can do that, right? Well, they don't just need shots taken. How do you convince them of that if you're Juwan Howard? I think is going to be a big key.
You got Doug McDaniel, and I want to keep focusing on this because a guy who's a true freshman point guard who wasn't even expected to start is going to be a 20-20 guy, like 20 assist rate, 20 turnover guy. That guy almost always goes, has a huge leap between his freshman and sophomore year. Now he's not going to go be like a 35-10 guy, right? He's going to there's a progression, but if he's a 25-15 guy, that is something that North Carolina did not have last year. And if you have someone like Doug, and that's what he was in high school, that's what he was projected as a guy who can do a lot of assists, like a Marquise Noel from Kansas State, right? Like that kind of guy.
Wow.
That guy was a fifth-year senior.
Yeah.
But go back and look at that guy as a sophomore, and that was the exact progression he made. He looked like Doug when he was a freshman. That's what you're talking about.
Well,
get me excited there, Seth. I hope it looks like that.
You get a fifth-year senior version of Doug McDaniel, but you're not going to get that next year. I mean,
no, I'm saying you're going to get a sophomore version of that guy.
Well, if we're talking about usage, right? Like if you do get Hunter Dickinson back, Caleb Love doesn't need to be a 30% usage guy. Like we were talking about earlier, where it's like, you needed someone to like take shots on this team, and Caleb Love could be that. But if you get Dickinson back, then Caleb Love doesn't have to be your guy who's like, all right, I'm going to dominate the ball. He can just be efficient, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. So which brings us, it's a great segue, Brian, which brings us to Hunter. I mentioned this on my podcast with Tim. I reached out to Hunter, asked him to come back on, and every time I've asked him before this, he's always said yes. I think he's been on with us like 4 times. And Tim, independent of me, reached out to him as well, and he told him the same thing. He's like, look, man, I'm not really talking about what I'm doing. I'm just doing my due diligence, is to paraphrase. I mean, it shows you how intent he is, because Hunter he doesn't shy away from talking about what he's doing and calling things out. So what I'm taking my cues from right now is the sentiment that I'm getting from inside, and in past conversations with Hunter. Sentiment I'm getting from inside is they think there's a real shot to get him to come back. I know that there's at least one collective that is planning to make him an offer or a pitch, or whatever you want to call whatever it is you do with a collective. And I heard there was talk that another may be planning to do the same thing. And I think that's a big deal for Hunter. I know when he was talking to us about Michigan's portal pursuits last year, he was like, look, if you aren't coming with big NIL, you aren't going to get big time players. So if you got that mindset from this vantage point that he had last year, now that he's on the other side of it, that's what he's looking for when he's out there talking to these other teams. And that's what it's going to take, at least in part, for Michigan to keep him, Brian.
Yeah, and if Michigan gets outbid on Hunter Dickinson, what are we doing here? Like, right? Like what is our whole like deal?
I mean, Michigan outbid some pretty big programs for football players. Multiple, like every once in a while, Maryland will just come in and be like, "Here's $1 million to keep a DC area guy home." They'll do that. So like, it's not unheard of to get outbid for a guy like Hunter Dickinson because he's very valuable to a lot of teams out there.
So I think
including Kansas, apparently.
Well, I mean, I guess if Kansas does, then Kansas, I mean, they're Kansas. But yeah. I feel like now you have a team that you can like support Hunter Dickinson with. And like, if he's going, there's two reasons he's going. Is one, he's looking at the fact that Kobe Buffkin and Jet Howard are gone, and he doesn't really feel like he wants to have another bubble season in his last college year. And then it's just like, I'm probably not going to be an NBA player. I got to get some scratch here while I can. So I think Michigan can check both those boxes now. And I don't know if, I mean, they're still looking in the portal for guys too. So if they're able to get like, God,
well, you said Olivier Kamwa.
If they're able to get Kamwa, who is a starter on the number 6 team in the country, or Matt Cleveland out of Florida State, I mean, then you're looking like, wow, this is something.
Man, Kamwa is the one that I'm like, and granted, a lot of my opinion is shaped on one game, and you should never do that. I know that, but he was so good against Duke, guys. I mean, the dude was a mid-range assassin. You mentioned Lloyd Vaught. Like, I mean, he rebounds, he defends. He doesn't shoot a lot of threes, but the ones he does shoot, he shoots at a high clip. And he was, at least in that game, lethal in the mid-range. It was like, this guy is like the poster child for old school, not every shot is a 3 basketball.
Yeah.
I was shocked that he was even in the portal. I don't know the story behind that.
And what was Tennessee last year? The number 1 defensive team in the country.
Yeah. Yes. So, like, I mean, you can get that guy. I mean, you don't even need Hunter back at that point. You'd like him back, but you get that guy, and you're like, oh, we're going to be okay.
Hey, I have a question. I mean, I've heard some rumblings that maybe Papa Conte, it may not actually show up. I mean, is that dependent on Hunter, or is that you have any noise on that?
So my understanding, he has some. There are some hurdles to clear for him. It sounds like on the academic side. I mean, you tend to see that with some of the foreign transplants. From time to time, and so I don't know if he will be in the class. But here's what I do know: that even if he makes it, they're chasing. I mean, this is not a reaction to Papa Conte and the uncertainty there, the recruitment of Olivier Kamwa, right? There was even some talk about Yuan Traore and trying. I know there's been contact with Yuan, but it hadn't progressed like they aren't as far down the runway with him. Like, they've had to Zoom with Kamwa and the whole pitch. They hadn't done that yet with Yuan Traore, and that, as far as I can tell, is totally independent of what happens with Papa. Somehow, some way, they feel like they can find space, to fit. Even if Papa comes, they can grab one of these other guys too. Now, Hunter coming back, does that change or make things more complicated? I imagine it does, but they got to be planning for that too, right? They think that there's a chance he comes back, so has to be taken into account in their numbers when they go after these other guys. Getting back to what we said though, Kamwa, you get Kamwa, and man, I'm taking them all and I'm figuring it out, Brian. I got into this conversation with Tim, and he was like, man, I don't know that you if you're getting Hunter back, if you can really bring in another one of these other guys. And I understand this sentiment saying that, hey, it's too many guys. You just recruited Trey Jackson. What message are you sending to him if you go grab Kamwa on top of Hunter coming back? My message is, I'm putting as many good players on my team as possible and figuring it out after that. I wonder if you think that that's too naive an approach to take.
I mean, that's what I do.
Right?
Right? Like,
I get it. I get what he's saying. I understand what he's saying. I just don't think Michigan can be in a position of turning down talent if talent wants to come.
yeah,
And-
that's kind of what I think too. It's like they're in the portal. They're gonna put together a team. If you can get a starter from a top 10 team, you got to do it. And you're gonna tell Trey Jackson is like, we got minutes for you at the 4 and 3, and you're gonna play. And
I mean, you can use him at the 5 too, as long
Nope.
as you're not using him against.
I would rather do that with
Bowling
Combo.
boys.
I would rather do that with Combo, but you got Terrence
Yeah.
Reed still in there. I mean, look,
Yeah.
guys' minutes are gonna go down. Trey Jackson, look, man, we gonna win. Your minutes are gonna go down. T. Will, yeah, captain, but sorry, pal. I mean, you still have a role on the team, but it's just gonna be a few less, depending on how things work out in practice. We aren't just gonna give guys roles; they have to earn them. But I'm not
T-Will's
gonna
gotta
turn away
know
competition.
what role he played in them being a bubble team this year, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, because he was he was miscast, and
Yeah.
That's not a criticism because I thought he was ready for a bigger role too. I was wrong. They were wrong. That's not a great fit for him, but I still think he can be a contributor on his team in a role more like the one he played as a sophomore. Now, that might not be the best. Might not be what he has in mind from a men's perspective, but that's what makes Michigan the best team it could be if you can get an Olivier Comway in here.
I saw this stat, and I can't vouch for it, but it came from some site or some place that seemed reliable. And it was, of the 40th youngest NCAA teams last year, one made the tournament. One of the 40th youngest. Of the 73 oldest teams, 31 made the tournament. And so, does it make sense to be in the transfer portal and going after older guys if you don't have those guys within your program? Well, I think maybe it does. And because that's what seems to lead to success.
As a little shout out to Seth. Jenny said, Doug is amazing. Looking forward to next year. I said something, to me, you said, I think it was you, Seth, who said that the message that he's sending is clear that, Dougie is going to be the guy. That doesn't mean he's the best player, but I'm handing the keys to the team. I'm saying this is your team. You aren't the best guy. You aren't the guy that we're going to clear out for every time down the floor. But if I'm Juwan, I'm like, look, Dougie is going to be my coach on the floor, kind of thing, and we'll play off of that. And if we need a shot, we're going to give it to
point
Caleb
guard
Love.
anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he's not going to be a true freshman point guard anymore.
Yeah.
That leap is a huge one for your efficiency, for everybody else's efficiency. Go and look at every single point guard by 5'8". Look at his freshman year to sophomore transition. When that guy can see the floor and understands what's going on, you saw the transition for Doug over the course of the year. It's a huge jump.
Yeah, you're going to have to coach that. You're going to have to coach that into the squad, give Dougie that confidence, and tell all the new guys, okay, fellas, this my quarterback. So, we'll see how it goes, man. It's going to be a fun thing to watch. Always fun with the Roundtable crew, MGoBlog.com. Of course, we got to be out of here. We'll be back tomorrow on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050, WTK, The Ticket, the official voice of the University of Michigan.